Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Sophie, and this channel is chronicling my journey of living my best life with multiple chronic health conditions. Today I'm going to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, how I ended up with post-traumatic stress disorder, and sort of how it manifested and stuff like that. So this will have a trigger warning. I'm not going to get into details, but I am going to be talking about traumatic events, including child abuse of various forms. So if that may trigger you, please do not watch the video. That is not my intent. I am just sharing this part of my story because most of the channel has been focused on my physical health issues, but I do have mental health issues as well, and they are most definitely chronic and affect my life, so I am just sharing my experience with those. To start, when I was born, my mom was addicted to drugs, so I was born addicted. I was in the NICU for a while. I was told that I died a couple times and they had to revive me, so it was traumatic being born, I guess, and things sort of continued to be traumatic throughout childhood because my mom was addicted to drugs. She also had AIDS. She did not get custody of me. My grandmother did, my mom's mom. So I was raised by my grandparents and my great aunt, who I just call Aunt. They raised me. My mom had visitation rights all throughout her life until she died. So all throughout my younger childhood, through most of elementary until my mom died when I was 11, there were custody battles every few years to change visitation times, just always going back and forth like that. And it was always nerve-wracking, I guess, because I never knew where I was going to end up. I mean, I lived with my grandparents, I visited my mom on the weekends and during the summer, but then with these custody battles, it was always like, would they give full custody to my mom? Would I have to move? Would I have to change schools? I could never really participate in a lot of like after school activities such as like Girl Scouts or anything because I was never in one place. Like, my mom did live close to me, but it was maybe like a half hour, 20 minutes away, not that far. But just during the summer, when she would have longer visitations, we might visit other family out of state. So I could never really participate in things growing up and just had those custody battles. When I was 6, my grandma died. It was sudden. She had a heart attack and died. That started a whole new battle for custody. Now it was my mom was trying to get, I don't think my mom was trying to get custody, but one of my aunts, my mom's sister in New York, was trying to get custody, which was really odd because I did not live in New York. I lived in Ohio. And yeah, it was just odd. And I didn't want to live in New York. I didn't want to live with them. It was very stressful. I remember being very concerned about where I was going to live. This was second grade, and just being worried I was going to like move states and what was going to happen. And I ended up talking to the judge, and I told the judge I wanted to stay with my great aunt, and that is what happened. So I was glad of that, and that sort of calmed a little thing like down, like custody wise. But then my aunt in New York got visitation with me during the summer, as well as my mom. So then summers were basically completely spent out of state. So again, couldn't really do any school activities. I will say when my mom died, I was blamed for her death. So my mom died when I was 11, and I'm not going to get into too many details, but I was told by one of my aunts who lives in New York that it was my fault she died, and if I loved her more, she would have fought harder, and I'm the one who should have died, not her. And I remember being on the phone in the back bedroom where I lived, holding the phone up to my ear, like in the fetal position on the floor, just like bawling, silently crying, not like wailing. And I guess my great aunt heard me but thought I was crying over my mom's death. And then eventually they started listening in on the phone and heard what was being said, and the phone was taken away from me, and there was lots of yelling. I ended up not going to my mom's funeral because, again, from my aunt on the phone, I was told just wait until we get our hands on you again. So this was part of the family that was abusing me out of state, and that's all the detail I will go in just because I don't want to trigger anyone. And I was just scared. I was too scared to go to the funeral. I ended up going to school that day, and I remember being surprised my cousin by marriage wasn't at school and asking where she was because she was fine the day before, and the people at lunch just sort of staring at me because she was at my mom's funeral, which again I was too scared to go to, and that was very awkward. So just a lot of trauma growing up, deaths, and then when I was 14, my grandpa died. He had been living with my great aunt, so he was also helping raise me. And that's sort of when things started spiraling in terms of my mental health. I did finally tell about the abuse, which I talked about a little in the last video about how I was told I was kind of blamed for it happening for so long because I didn't tell. They had asked if anything was happening and I always denied it. And apparently it's my fault I kept having to go back because I denied it. They said they thought something was going on because whenever I would have to go out of state to visit family, I would beg them. I remember pleading with them not to make me go and getting in the car and like looking out the back window, like just bawling and like watching us drive away out of state and my great aunt being in the car where she dropped me off, and I'm just looking out the back window like bawling. And then there were other things, like I would write short stories growing up, and they were always about like a child being abused in various ways. And again, my social worker would be contacted, I would be asked if anything was happening, I would say no, and that would be the end of it. Looking at my notes. My therapist at the time was seeing me like pro bono, and I did eventually tell him as well, and he got very angry. Anger and conflict in general is a very big one of my triggers that I have not worked through. I do not handle it well at all. So I basically didn't really talk to him much about the details of what happened because I didn't want him to be angry, because when people are angry or there's conflict or stuff like that, I'm always scared people are going to hurt me. So I just didn't really talk much about it. There was also something my social worker shared with me that my grandpa, before he died, when I was still going out of state, had said something about my family wanting to sell me. And again, I'm not getting into details, but he wanted the money. They said he would get paid if they would help him basically kidnap me. And I did overhear talk of them talking about kidnapping me. But he decided not to do it because then he would never see me again. So there were definitely signs. Looking back, it's sort of, now I just think like it's par for the course with everything that's happening But yeah, just looking back, like lots of signs were definitely missed, things that weren't acted upon, but there's nothing I can do about that. My outlet when I was growing up, like I said, I would write short stories. Sorry, I was closing the keyboard on the desk. I would draw. Normally my pictures were like of monsters and stuff like that, which obviously is not very girly. Then after I told and I was able to express myself a little better, I would write poetry, though I had a therapist tell me that she didn't consider it poetry because it was too dark, but that was a really good outlet for a while. I did try different types of therapy. Like I've talked about, I've been in therapy on and off since I was like 5 or 6. They did attempt EMDR once, but I couldn't stop laughing. It just seems so silly. And also because of the alexithymia, I don't really have a lot of emotional response unless I'm triggered in some way, and then it's like over the top emotional response. As I talked about in the previous video, I did do that intensive outpatient program, and that was really helpful. I think in working through some of the triggers I had, there were certain rooms of the house. Apparently, I would make like a large semicircle around the door. I wouldn't walk directly past the door. I now have to go in that room constantly for stuff in the house, so it's no longer that type of trigger. But I do always wonder if I've worked through things or if I've just bottled them up again and I'm just numb to them. And I don't really know a way to figure that out. I guess I just deal with things as they come up. I know like conflict triggers me whenever I do something wrong. Like constructive criticism at times, depending on how it's worded and presented, can trigger me. And when I say trigger, I'm normally talking about like inside, I feel like that fight or flight response. I don't think I show it at all. No one's ever told me like, well, are you okay? Like you look scared or anything like that. But inside I feel like my heart's racing. I guess I just feel what people would consider anxious. I don't do well with conflict at all. I try to avoid it at all cost. And like I said before, anger I definitely cannot deal with. I'm just internally reacting like I'm preparing to be hurt. And I don't really know how to work through that either. That's a work in progress. But yeah, that's sort of how my PTSD happened and why I have it. A little bit about how I've dealt with it. But it's definitely still a work in progress. I'm also not very assertive. That goes with the conflict and scared of being hurt aspect of PTSD. I'm trying to get better with that, but it's hard. Definitely hard. Anyway, this is a super long video and I apologize for that, but it's been a traumatic life thus far. Then I guess to finish off the traumas, I guess my great aunt died of lung cancer in 2017 when I was 29, and I was driving back and forth to Ohio to take care of her and spent the last week with her taking care of her 24/7. So I was there with her when she died, holding her hand, talking to her and all of that. And then my father figure, who I moved to the East Coast to live with, died suddenly in 2018 when I was 28, and I was the one who found him. I did CPR and all of that. So those were definitely traumas as well. I'm not really sure I've ever processed them. I was in therapy at the time, but the therapist was not very good. But I just keep moving forward because that's the option, basically. But yeah, those were definitely two big traumas. I might do a separate video just on the deaths in my life that I've experienced and how they sort of shaped who I am and how I reacted to them. Maybe in a future video in this little mental health series I'm doing at the moment. I don't know if that will be the next one or not. I was planning on doing my maladaptive coping mechanisms for the next video, but I think the death video might be more in line with the mental health realm that I'm on right now. So one of those will be the next video. I hope you guys are having a good day whenever it is you are seeing this. I'm sorry this was sort of a down, negative type of video, but I did want to share just because when I do have my mental health issue days and I talk about it, you guys will have sort of an idea of what's going on behind the scenes. Anyway, that's enough of this. I will talk to you guys next time. Bye, guys.